Hello, and welcome to episode 9 of Cooking with Grief, the comedy podcast that asks the really important questions. Questions like, can horses feel shame? And why are the sentences, where's my wombat and where's my womb hat so similar and yet so different? We don't necessarily have the answer to these questions, but it's important just to raise them as topics. But joining me as ever is my friend and loyal co-host, a man who is to light-hearted conversation what goldfish are to the Dewey Decimal System. But more importantly, he's the disputed healthy weight champion of Pound World. It's Chris!
Hello!
How it actually works is this is just a podcast where two friends, both called Chris, bring two topics each we've learned about in the week and talk about them. It's an insight into half-remembered history, a study of barely understood worlds, and a confidently unresearched foray into the minds of two people struggling with adult life. We do this podcast so we don't have to take our real jobs so seriously. It features neither cooking nor grief, but by the end you'll wish it did. Now, a couple of episodes ago, we, well, Chris, you went on a rant, a riff, a sort of a eulogising fondness for the actor Kurt Russell, and it spawned what will become our first feature, Chris's Kurt Russell Facts. And as the consummate professionals we very nearly are, we forgot to do it last time. So, just so we're all caught up, I'm going to throw over to you, and you're going to enjoy two Kurt Russell facts.
So my slightly unhealthy obsession with Kurt Russell has yielded the following facts, so this first one actually showed up out of the blue on crack.com. You know, it was like a sign from the universe that my Kurt Russell obsession is, in fact, healthy. So, Kurt's first movie was actually opposite Elvis Presley in a film called It Happened at the World's Fair. What happened? I'm not entirely sure. He was just a young boy then. Kurt Russell, not Elvis.
Thanks for qualifying.
Elvis's last movie was called Change of Habit, where he played a character called John Carpenter. Then, in 1979, Kurt Russell starred in the TV movie Elvis, playing the title role, which was directed by John Carpenter. Also, I found out that in Forrest Gump, where the bit near the start where Elvis Presley turns up, he's actually voiced by Kurt Russell, apparently, in an uncredited role.
There'll be more next time on Kurt Russell Facts.
I also have another one.
Oh, okay. There will be more immediately now on Kurt Russell Facts.
The character of Solid Snake in the Metal Gear Solid franchise was in fact based on Kurt Russell's appearance in Escape from New York, where he plays the character Snake Plissken, which is why in Metal Gear Solid 2, when Snake shows up in disguise, he calls himself Iroquois Plissken. And that's all I have for you this week.
And was Kurt Russell adept at hiding in cardboard boxes?
We can only assume so.
Join us next time for more Kurt Russell Facts. So that's all the podcast admin out of the way. I can't believe that the first time we've come up with a regular feature, it's Kurt Russell Facts. But there we are. We didn't plan it, and now we're stuck with it. Well, we're not. We could decide not to do it.
Or run out, or
all the comments
Kurt
say
Russell sends a cease and desist letter.
They're all positive facts. It's not like you said, it's not like you opened with Kurt Russell was once arrested for mooning a pope. There's nothing defamatory in there.
Yeah, that's true.
So now on to the usually scheduled content. Chris, why don't you start us off with your first topic?
So, Chris, what is your biggest fear?
Oh, that's a tough one, and I think more appropriate for my therapist than this podcast, but as they're the same thing, I'll just have to go with it. I'll go with just the passing of time and unfulfilled dreams. Classic.
Yeah, fairly existential. Well, my biggest fear is being eaten alive by a snake. But my second biggest fear is being buried mistakenly while still being alive. This happened to... Well, they weren't buried, but in South Africa the other week, a woman was discovered alive in the morgue fridge, having been certified as dead. And then they opened the drawer, to pull the dead body out, and found she was breathing.
The doctor that not diagnosed her as dead. That's the wrong, what do doctors do? Pronounced her dead.
Yeah.
How bad are they at their job?
Well, I don't know, because it's not the first time it's happened. Another time, a inmate in a jail in Spain was certified dead by 3 separate doctors, and yet he woke up hours before the autopsy.
That sounds like an elaborate escape plan. Like, fake your death, get wheeled out in an outside location, then break out of the mortuary van.
You have to time it right, or you just end up being dissected alive. But yeah, the fact that it could happen multiple times, and this sort of happened in the same year, that's why the idea of being, buried in a coffin, as is traditional, again, so at least these people were found in the morgue, whereas, if you were put in the coffin and then put on the ground, what are you going to do?
Was it not the Victorians, they were so stupid, fearful of this very thing happening, that they had little bells installed, so the little...
Yes.
Yeah.
Safety coffins, they were called. So yeah, no, that is exactly it. So they'd have ones with little bells that would be rang from within the coffin.
It sort of make that famous scene in Kill Bill less impressive. Instead of the 1-inch punch, it's just ding, 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 ding.
There's also one here about a man in Manchester who had a glass pane inserted on the coffin, and a watchman had to go inspect it every night to see if there was any breath on the glass.
And I take it the story doesn't end that there ever was.
No, I assume he was indeed dead. I remember reading somewhere, but I don't know if it's just an urban legend, that, they dug up coffins in Victorian times, and they found, scratch marks on the inside.
Well, you just think some very sharp worms got in there?
Well, maybe people just embellish the story entirely. But that's why, the way I'd either want to go... No, having already gone, the way I'd like to be disposed of... Well, to be fair, we are now cooking with grief, because one of the ways I'd accept would be like a funeral pyre. Open air, so if I'm still alive, I can sort of roll off it in horrific agony.
But wait, is this the silver lining?
I mean, if you get burnt in a crematorium, you just burn and you can't roll off. Whereas at least this way I'd be able to roll off and be like, ouch, Jesus, why have you tried to barbecue me?
Oh, so you want a Greek-style pyre with
exactly.
open air in front of the gods and coins on your eyes?
Yes, exactly. Alternatively...
Stuffed?
Oh, actually, no, that is one. Have you ever seen that German, I think, scientist who, skins the bodies and puts them on display? I can't remember his name. It's called, Bodyworks, but I can't remember the doctor's name. Yeah, no, I went to an exhibition of it in Amsterdam, and, I would genuinely be happy with that to happen to me, but only if I got to be one of the cool displays. Because, there was one guy in there who was, sailing like a pirate ship, who was, behind the wheel, one of those big wooden wheels. And then there's another guy who was, playing football, and, a guy jumping over the fence. But then there was, some people who literally, it was just their spleen was on display. That was it. You don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be the spare parts guy. But, you want to be in an action pose.
I mean, that was going to be one of my supplementary questions, is that if you could be stuffed and mounted in any pose, what would you go for? But
well, there were 2 people that were stuffing each other, so to speak.
What, sort of doing the full Sunday roast?
Yeah, basically.
Good Lord, have they no shame?
They were exposed to the world. More than skin deep. Oh, and the other way that, I'd be happy to be disposed of, I think it's Tibet, where they lead the bodies out for the vultures. You just get eaten.
I like that idea, because it's sort of circle of life, because I know cremated less so, but being buried has quite a big ecological impact. So I know you can get your ashes turned in, fertilised, and then you become a tree, which is a sort of greener way of doing it. Being torn apart by carrion is somehow quite a comforting thing. Again, as long as you're dead.
As long as you're definitely dead.
Definitely, absolutely, Although, I think I'd be too embarrassed, and I'd rather just die than say, I'm really sorry you've made a mistake. I can't send food back even if it's the wrong thing I've ordered. There's no way I'm going to say...
I'm not dead yet.
I'm not dead yet, no.
Yeah, it's a fair point, actually.
Died because of social anxiety. Well, there was a story recently that more and more morgues are having to accommodate for larger bodies, so they're installing bigger shelves because people are getting fatter and fatter. And yeah, it's not very dignified cramming someone like me who looks like a cross between Jabba the Hutt and a blancmange into a reasonable sized
Shelf.
tray. Yeah.
Yes.
Although I'm, if I'm dead, I don't care about dignity, to be honest. It's like, chop me up, look for any bits that are useful to science. Not many, I'll be honest. If I died in an unusual way, investigate that. But, more than likely, I'm going to do an Elvis.
Die in the toilet. Hope he played by Kurt Russell.
Ideally, both. He would reenact me dressed up as Elvis, shitting himself to death on the toilet.
Oh, my dad once actually was at a fancy dress party, and my dad went as Elvis. Apparently he got food poisoning, and he said afterwards he was sat on the toilet thinking, oh God, I'm actually going to die on the toilet dressed as Elvis.
The commitment. He thought, them prawns smell a bit dodgy, but what would be really great for an anecdote?
For other people.
By the end of his life, Elvis was eating a sandwich that they called the King's Special, and it was a whole loaf of bread hollowed out, filled with a whole pack of bacon, like 8 pounds of sausage meat, 12 fried eggs, and loads of American cheese. And at the autopsy, the people that did the autopsy described his innards of consisting of a thick congealed clay-like substance.
Oh.
It's like, well, he was eating 5,000 calorie sandwiches. What the fuck do you expect?
Oh, man. Well, I think, again, like you say, though, he was committing to the theme, because he was a king, and he died on the throne.
Probably with gout, like his regal heroes.
So, that's my story of death and despair. Over to you.
I've been reading this week about medieval bestiaries, right? The catalogues of what animals exist and their traits, and there's pictures and stuff. They're less, scientifically rigorous as perhaps modern day studies of animals are, because there's a lot of guesswork. A lot of things that they could quite easily have worked out, but they just go, no, something ridiculous, and let's not bother to check. So, I was reading about this book called The Aberdeen Bestiary in about 1200 AD, and it's got some hilarious descriptions of what they thought animals were. So, for example, they thought mice were just clods of dirt that grew tails and legs, and if you just compacted mud, they would eventually become mice.
I love that evidence of being like, there are lots of things that are not made of mud. These things look like those things, only smaller. But we're going
mice
to go
seem to be in
mud.
dirty places, therefore the dirt becomes mice. You know what I mean? Like, that's the sort of level we're at.
There's a sort of half-assed logic.
Yeah, you can
to
imagine
that.
it at the sort of medieval office going, not Steve. I was going to say Steve. Then that's not a very medieval name. Bartholomew. Where do mice come from? Hello, mud. Yeah, that'd be fine. Let me richly embroider this this massive book. So worms, they believe, spontaneously generated from dead bodies, just grew out of them. You can see the link there.
Sort of, yeah, I can see that. That's somebody who couldn't be asked to watch the whole thing and was just like, well, I can
this
see
guy's
the
been dead for a
worms,
week,
so
and now there are worms.
weren't there
Yeah,
before,
that sort of makes sense.
Yes.
You know what I mean? They believe bees were just a kind of bird that lived inside livestock, which is, again, you can sort of see where they're coming from. In this bestiary, they sort of write quite extensively about how bees elect a king bee, but literally in a democracy. Like, literally nominate one bee to be king.
I love that. Imagine the sheer confidence you have to just write something down that is so obviously not researched and wrong, but just be like, it's just like, I'll just stick with it. Nobody's gonna call me out on this.
That is a dude really struggling for a word count. Oh, have you got that 500 words on bees? Yeah. I mean, obviously, I'll talk about how they're definitely birds, and we all know that. But yeah, they live in a democracy. What's democracy? Never mind. There's a passage about how you could, if you want to make bees, you can beat calves.
Again, that's something that surely somebody has tried, and then be like, no, you can't. In fact, we can literally see that they live in hives, because that's where we get the honey from.
So bears were born shapeless, just like formless lumps of flesh that the mother then had to lick into shape to become bears.
To be fair, that one is probably like because nobody wants to go near a new mother bear to check out, because they're just like, there's a bear there, I'm going to stand as far away as humanly possible.
You can even understand from the point of like, if you see bear cubs, they're just these tiny balls of pink blind flesh that don't resemble bears, so it's easy to think, oh well, they need to be made into bears.
Yeah.
Now, right, this is the weird one that they could so easily have disproved. Goats had blood so hot it could dissolve diamonds.
Maybe nobody had any diamonds, because I'm pretty sure they had goats.
If they had goats, they probably killed goats, probably got good bloat anywhere, didn't burn their flesh.
No, yeah, you're right.
Bit of a curveball, but pelicans. I don't know why there were so many pelicans around to be written about.
I didn't even think they had pelicans in Aberdeen, but anyway.
In the zoo, maybe, I don't know, a very early prototype of the zoo. But pelicans had really terrible tempers, and they would stamp their young to death, but then they'd go into mourning, and their blood would revive the stamped-on babies to become real pelicans. And it's like, why? There are so many different steps to that. Why?
How do you get there from observing a pelican?
What they probably saw was a pigeon just lose its temper a bit, and they sort of ran with it. But the nice thing about this thing is it didn't just include real animals, but they sort of speculated on imaginary ones.
At this stage, they might as well. They're like, we have as much knowledge on the real ones as we do on the fake ones at this stage, so let's just go for it.
Yeah, they've got a publishing deal. Let's pump them out. So there was something called the Bonacon, which was a bull that was rumoured to live in Asia, and it could shit fire.
Wow.
And there was even a handy demonstration of two dudes chasing it and then just getting melted by sort of pyroclastic diarrhea, which was my band name, of course, at school. Obviously, it had to mention that there were dragons, but unlike most sort of folk stories go with dragons were much more like long snakes, and they were the sworn enemy of the elephant. Because there's loads of pictures of just elephants getting wrapped up by these dragons. And there was something called the Yale. It was a giant black horse with two floppy horns that acted like feelers, but then when it got in a fight, the horns hardened to use as weapons. And it's there is enough interesting creatures. If you've got pelicans, don't make up horses.
Yeah, no, it just all sounds like something like you say a drunk guy at the pub just sort of comes up with and just says yeah, and everyone just sort of goes, you know what, I don't have it, I've got to toil in the fields for 18 hours a day, I don't have time to go proving wrong about pelicans. Yeah, sure, sounds real. Why at this stage, why not? I just love old science, because it was so there was obviously some sort of desire to understand the world and categorize it, but there seemed to be a complete lack of bothering to actually make sure that what you're saying has any sort of value and correlation to the world. It's when they used to do sickness, and they'd be like, you've got too much bile, that's why you're in a bad mood. And be like, have you based this on anything? No, just sounds legit. Just too much bile. Be like, yeah, fair enough. Leeches for everything.
Who are you to disagree?
Yeah, exactly. Are you a doctor? No? Well, there you go.
You can't necessarily judge past historical sort of scientific endeavours by modern scientific
it's just funny,
rigorousness.
Just the way they sort of... It wasn't even the lack of... Well, I suppose it's lack of rigour, but it's sort of... I don't know,
it's not research, it's speculation.
It's they just speculate and then just go, yeah, it was good enough. Without actually following through on...
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a continuum, I guess.
But it's because, the Greeks came up with the idea of atoms. They didn't know exactly what they were, but somebody was just sort of did a thought experiment. It was if I could chop something in half, I could chop it in half again, and I could chop it in half again, and so on and so on and so on, until you end up with something so small you can't chop it up anymore, and that's what everything must be made out of. And you can sort of follow the logic and be like, yeah, sure. And obviously they didn't, they had no way of knowing what atoms were made of and all that stuff. You can sort of follow the sort of thought experiment.
That's very different to saying, and you chop it and chop it and chop it, and then once you get really tiny, there are tiny spiders.
Yeah, exactly.
Go, what?
Where did they come from?
Where are the spiders?
Yeah.
They're just everything is made of the tiniest thing, and that tiny thing is spiders.
Just spiders everywhere.
Let's say you were the first to discover a certain animal. What would be the freakiest animal to discover for the first time?
Well, to be honest, I feel like that anyway, even knowing about the duck-billed platypus. It just doesn't make any sense.
The only animal that could make its own custard.
Oh. Science.
Yeah, probably.
Science and cooking. Oh.
See,
that was too clever.
That could be in a modern bestiary. You know, the platypus, it makes its own custard.
I leave it to you, dear reader, to work out what this means.
Yeah, a platypus invented the sponge pudding to go with its miraculous invention. I think the first time anyone ever saw a giraffe, it just doesn't make sense. Because especially as they use the necks for fighting. If you came across two sort of horse bodies, but then these massive neck extensions just absolutely twatting each other with their necks, you're going to be like, this is just weird. It's just weird.
Yeah.
And there's probably stuff like that in the ocean that, not giraffes, I mean, like, equally freaky stuff.
Oh, there's even more freaky stuff down there. It's like giant squids, just giant tentacle monstrosities that fight with whales.
You know, the rare times a dead colossal squid floats up, and it's like, its eyes the size of a truck tyre, and you think...
It's just excessive.
Excessive, like it's a choice. Like, you're just taking the piss now. Come on, mate, right, we've all had a drink. There's no need to be that big.
Well, just imagine if you're going back to, if you travelled from England to somewhere and then you came back to this, like Africa or somewhere, and you were going back to describe these weird things. People are just like, bullshit. But no, seriously, it's a thing that looks kind of like a horse, just with like a giant neck. You're like, no. You're talking bullshit. And they'd be like, and then there's this other thing, and it's huge, and its nose can pick stuff up. We'd be like, no, you're just talking bollocks. Like, go away.
Yeah, and these like big cats that hang out in groups and they just sort of laugh hysterically. Yeah, all right. And these sort of like long reptilian worms that can, crush a car. Oh, well, not a car, obviously. That's way too modern. Hang on a minute. What's this thing? It's like a horse with wheels. All right, now you're really taking the piss.
Well, yeah, and then imagine like describing zebras and being like, oh, you know what horses look like? Yeah, but just imagine them, but black and white stripes. Be like, no way would nature make something black and white stripes. Like, horses are horse-coloured for a reason.
Just imagine a photoshopped horse. What's photoshopped? Oh, God, you guys are such Luddites. I know, we are the Luddites. So that's my first of two topics, and I'm going to go over to Chris's second. Chris, what do you got for us?
In the modern world, and this is very fortunate, we're quite good at not dying. Well, wars are thankfully rare. Obviously, there's stuff going on elsewhere in the world, but even then, it's still, on a relative scale, not as bad as it has been in past parts of human history. Small comfort if you're there, but anyway. Diseases, again, depending where you are in the world, but we're getting better at that. In general, as a whole, humanity is sort of getting pretty good at not dying. But death from selfies is now one of the, I wouldn't say a big killer, I mean, it's not cancer or something. But it has now become a serious issue throughout the world. And people getting themselves into dangerous situations. So technically the cause of death is whatever it is that killed you. But the act of trying to take the photo in front of said dangerous thing and not paying full enough attention to what's going on is now actually become a serious issue.
I'm glad you weren't going to sort of add the story of these damned photography machines stealing people's souls.
No. But it has prompted Goa in India, the government there, to bring in no selfie zones on certain points because people keep falling off cliffs or getting washed out to sea.
I mean, I am, technically part of this generation, but I've taken perhaps 2 selfies in my lifetime and not within the, not for 5 years.
Yeah, well, in selfies, I tend to just look like a foot with a beard. So.
A foot?
A foot. Just a human foot, but with a beard.
In what way do you look like a foot? Are you taking pictures of your feet?
Yeah, oh shit, that's what I've been doing wrong.
That's a footsie. It's not a selfie at all.
But yeah, so...
Hang on. Oh,
damn, it's just a stupid body part. Just leave me alone. It does not warrant further investigation.
Oh, okay. It's just... It's just, I don't know. I want to stick it. You don't look like a foot, mate. You look nice. You don't look like a foot. Even if you look like a foot, you look nice, but you don't look like a foot. Sorry, I'm focusing on the wrong part of the story, but I don't know. I'd hate for your self-esteem to suffer.
Anyway, back on topic.
Sorry.
So not only is the they've actually tried to limit that, some other people around the world are trying to develop an app to warn you when you're in a dangerous situation.
It slightly defeats the point of not being on your phone.
Well, yeah, because it also turns out that, depending on where you are in the world, depends what's going to kill you. So, if you're in... Usually it's falling off a cliff. Just trying to take that photo and you step back too far. Which has been like a comedy trope for years, even before selfies. Somebody trying to take the perfect photo and stepping back too far. If you're in America... and Russia apparently as well, you're more likely to just end up shooting yourself or something, or being shot. Try to take some ridiculous selfie.
Yeah, that makes sense, I guess. Because I remember when Pokemon Go came out, it was at Manchester Station, and there were signs literally like on every platform saying, "Do not jump down onto the tracks to catch a Spearizard," or whatever. I don't know.
You haven't played Pokemon, have you?
I'm afraid not. It's part of popular culture, and therefore I've had nothing to do with it.
I haven't played it since I had the original one on Game Boy.
The one without the black light, so it was impossible to play most of the times.
Exactly.
in a dark country.
Exactly. That is exactly the one I had. No colour, nothing. Just green and black.
Yeah. So, nice chocolate, though. If they fancy sponsoring us.
Part of my job involves working at height, climbing towers and whatnot. One of my colleagues who's been there a lot longer was just telling stuff. So, nowadays, we obviously have the health and safety culture. And I, for one, am thankful for it, because when I climb, I'm fully attached. I have, all sorts of safety equipment, and I'm always, if I was to slip, in theory, I should survive.
Broadly fine. What I like about that anecdote is by not telling people, as is absolutely right, what you do, it does add an air of mystery, does he work at the circus? Is he a tightrope walker?
Don't give it away.
Is he, heavily involved in Fathers for Justice?
Well, yeah, no, so one of my colleagues was just telling stories about how, back in the day, you were literally so that's one of the other things, is we always have to climb in pairs. So if anything goes wrong, there's somebody.
You've got a nice snack, yeah.
Whereas back in the day, you could just be sent on your own. So he was once sent over to work in Texas. And obviously, with Texas being absolutely massive, this particular tower was miles away from anybody else. From anywhere. Miles away from any nearest town. Nobody around for miles. And he literally just had to go up there on his own with nothing more than a little it's called a pole belt, so it's sort of just you sits around the pole. It doesn't attach onto anything. You just hope the friction holds you on. And and he's climbing hundreds of feet into the air on his own, miles away. And he's just if he'd fallen and died, nobody would even have known. For days until the next engineer was sent.
Yeah, there'd be some buzzards having a nice tea, but that's it.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody would know. I, for one, am perfectly happy that health and safety's gone mad, because I'd much rather do it this way.
Yeah, I never really sort of got why people, people going, bloody health and safety, ruin this country. And it's a lot of it is just, in the 70s, people used to, drive drunk and not wear seatbelts. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty happy that we take such a positive view on not doing those things.
Yeah.
I don't see that as sort of somehow a nanny state. It's more this is the shit you should have been doing without the regulations. Mm-hmm. If we need these regulations to make sure you don't get absolutely smashed, then hammer it through country roads from the pub home.
Yeah.
Then good.
Yep, I'm all for it.
Is there a scenario you can imagine where you would take a life-threatening selfie? Is there any photo good enough?
Life-threatening? No, because it's usually just not worth it. It's those people that climb buildings and stuff, without any...
Like the free climbing.
Yeah, and then take selfies at the top and jump across stuff, and it's just one slip and you are going splat. And it does occasionally happen.
Yeah, they never upload that footage, though.
Well, no, because they can't.
Yeah, no one else has the password.
Yeah, it's just like, is it worth it? Unless it's a selfie with Kurt Russell.
It just makes me think that your fandom goes beyond an appreciation of his body of work. And he is on your mind a lot, mate.
Yeah.
I just don't want you to end up in a conversation with your girlfriend saying, look, there's 3 of us in this relationship. Me, you, and Kurt Russell. And the sooner you understand that, the better we'll get along. Imagine if someone played this to him one day.
I'm sure he has better things to do.
I mean, I'm pretty sure we have better things to do, and yet we persist.
Yeah, that's true. So, with my second topic out of the way, it's over to you to wrap it up for us.
You sound so defeated. Oh, God. Make it end. Go on, get it over and done with. Right, so, my second topic, exciting, interesting topic, is the headline of a story I saw, which is New York City rats are boldly jumping in strollers, or prams for UK listeners, or for German listeners, that would be Jungen Strollenbüger.
Is that real?
Yeah, probably not.
I was really excited then. I thought I'd learned something.
So the article goes on, residents and officials are demanding that the city do more to battle the vermin infestations. By contrast, on the way to work, I have to walk past several fields. Quite often there's deer in the fields, which is a nice idyllic thing. And so, sometimes, I'll stop and the deer will approach and I might have an apple in my bag and I can feed an apple to a deer, which is pretty cool. I'll take a photo.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you sure you're not a Disney princess?
I can be both, mate. The two are not mutually exclusive. I mean, I chuck a bit of apple near the deer because I've never got into an approach. But allow me a bit of artistic license, come on. I'm setting that as a counterpoint to would the scene be as idyllic if it were rats? There'd certainly be a lot pushier. I wouldn't have to coax them over with apple that already have tried to eat me shoes or whatever.
The thing is, obviously there's all these conservation efforts because we never want, most people don't want animals to die out, rhinos or whatever. Mm-hmm. But then at the same time, we get really annoyed with animals that thrive in the conditions that humanity has made. We love pandas, which are terrible at existing.
Yeah.
They eat one food that has very little nutritional value, and they don't like to reproduce.
What, pot noodle?
Yes, exactly. We're obsessed with saving them. But then foxes have adapted. Foxes have obviously originally lived in forests and hunted vermin and all that, and now they've adapted really well to living in cities and scavenging and probably eating the rats or whatnot, and everyone hates them and always wants them urban foxes to be killed.
I mean, I get your point, but a panda has never pissed on my back door or had sex so loudly in my backyard that they're just... Have you ever heard, foxes have sex?
I don't know, I've heard foxes make horrible noises, but I never checked to see what they were doing.
Oh, it's very erotic. I mean, loud. Yeah, they just, they just scream. I think they're having sex. It doesn't sound consensual, if that's what they're doing. It could be fighting or just telling bad jokes, I don't know. A panda has never kept me up at night just screaming its face off in my backyard, as far as I know, unless they've been working on fox impressions.
It's like pigeons. Everyone hates pigeons.
I like pigeons.
And pigeons main evolutionary advantage is they just have no shame whatsoever. That's literally it. They're not fast, they're not big, they're not adept at hunting or anything. They just literally have no shame whatsoever, which allows them to live in huge numbers in cities. There is no piece of food too disgusting or situation too grim for a pigeon to be nah, I'm above that.
In many ways, I see myself as the human equivalent, as I'm squatting over a bin fighting foxes for the last bit of doner meat. Fuck off, it's mine, I paid for it.
And yet everybody loves doves, even though they are essentially just pigeons, cleaner pigeons.
Hippie pigeons. Oh, give peace a chance. Alright, John Lennon, flop off.
You're throwing shade at John Lennon now.
Well, there's a lot of shade to be thrown at John Lennon, but that's not what this is about. I'm saying doves are the John Lennon of the bird world.
I think it was really weird. So I was in London the other week. And... Well, I should say the other week, it was actually ages ago.
Doesn't matter.
But yeah, nobody's here to contradict me.
Literally doesn't matter, mate. Completely pointless addition to the anecdote that I'm known only elongating now.
But anyway, so I looked out the window and I saw...
Sorry, when was this?
An indeterminate point in the past.
Okay.
So I looked out the window and I saw a green parrot. So I thought, because I was, in somebody's flat, so I was looking out at some of the flats. And, I think, somebody's, birds escaped. And then I saw another one. I was like, all right, so 2 of the birds have escaped. That's weird. And then I saw, another 10 of them. I was like, all right, this is just weird now. Nobody has that many green parrots. It turns out there are actually colonies of green parrots living in London. And nobody's entirely sure where they came from. There's a load of conflicting stories, because obviously they're not native, but nobody's entirely sure, how they ended up there. My favourite one is the idea that Jimi Hendrix let them out, just because that's rock and roll, but it's also probably the least realistic.
Is it? Of all the things he did, it's
Oh no, it's perfectly realistic that he did that, just Jimi Hendrix releasing 2 solitary... I mean, unless he had an entire flock of green parrots, he most likely had at most 2, and that's probably not enough for them to start actual colonies in, a climate that is not exactly made for parrots.
You know how parrots, when they're pets, that they have 5 or 6 phrases that they pick up and they'll repeat them? What if a parrot was to listen on to you at home, what would it end up saying?
Something really, really dull. Oh, I want a cup of tea. Yeah.
In a Birmingham accent.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Oh, what a cup of tea.
I saw a news headline today, though, saying, a parrot has been taught how to speak in a Yorkshire accent. Does that want a cup of tea?
Hey, I'm a fucking parrot! No, wait, that wasn't... I don't know what that was.
That was
Johnny Vegas' parrot. Just as a sort of a bonus story to the rats in New York, just to go careering back to the original point. So, obviously, rats... get used to environments. But also, apparently, so do stray dogs, because in Moscow, packs of stray dogs have learned how to use the underground there.
Yeah, I've seen those. They're, really clever. They know what to get off.
They know where all the sort of sellers sort of harass the tourists and, avoid them.
Yeah, apparently they've become... Because obviously, feral dogs normally become, more aggressive. Despite what, Disney films and whatever would have you believe, nature is fucking cruel. If you're not the meanest bastard around, you will starve to death or get eaten.
Yeah, non-domestic animals essentially live in a constant state of fear and hunger.
Yes, exactly.
Take that, Disney.
Yeah. So normally feral dogs, they're dangerous. They're very aggressive because that's the only way to survive. Whereas apparently these ones in Moscow, they actually have learned to sort of be petable and cute and stuff because they're more likely to get food by being nice and people just throwing them some scraps than they are by trying to eat people, because that just gets them shot.
Unlike monkeys in Thailand, have learned to target tourists who are A, more likely to have food on them, and B, more inclined to give them food rather than the locals just considering them a pest.
Yeah. Oh, I met some people from South Africa.
South Africa.
Who
that was my Yorkshire accent.
They lived in a sort of a wildlife conservation village thing. So there's no street lamps, that type of thing. They had electricity and whatnot, but it was all about trying to minimise the sort of impact. But that meant obviously you're not allowed to kill the wildlife unless there's direct threat. And apparently the baboons realise this, and also baboons are sneaky bastards. So apparently they're literally they know you're not going to do anything against them. They also know that they can rip your arms off if you try. In an actual physical contest, the baboon will win. They know you're not going to do anything more drastic. So apparently they literally, they accidentally leave the back door open without thinking. You'd come back in and there'd be a shitload of baboons in your kitchen just going through all your cupboards. Apparently once they're saying, somebody brought a cake round and they followed the person and then just waited. And they knew the cake had gone into the kitchen. And they waited till somebody opened the window. And then they just climbed in through the window and went into the kitchen, just took the cake and all.
I thought you were going to say wait till, they shut their eyes to blow out the candles. And then... Surprise! Oh, fuck, they've nicked the cake. See, the thing is, right, my first topic was all about looking back at inaccurate descriptions of animals. You could quite easily, even on 100 years, use this as an example of, this is what they thought. Baboons are sneaky bastards.
That's not
No,
inaccurate.
it's not inaccurate. It's a less than scientific description. And here you'll find Baboonus maroonus. And You know
Good
what?
science.
Ad-libbing scientific names for animals is harder than I thought, even with a basic knowledge of Latin. Here's Babunus manunus, and he was, in the layman's terms, a sneaky bastard. Hey pals, make sure you keep listening after the outro, because there's a message from some fellow podcasters about their podcast, which we think you'll really enjoy. Okay, cheers, bye. So there we go, that's the second of my 2 topics. I hope you've enjoyed them. We'll be back next time with 2 new stories each. Much more importantly, a brand new Kurt Russell fact.
Let's not overpromise things. Let's hope we have a fact. We're not exactly consummate professionals here.
Well, it's mostly on you. I just need to remember to ask you what your Kurt Russell fact is.
Again, we're not consummate professionals. There's a fair chance we'll both forget to do both of these things.
You're right, we'll never do it again.
But if we do...
You'll be the first to hear about it. That's it, that's episode 9. I've been Chris.
I've been a different Chris.
Thank you for listening. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Cooking with Grief. If you enjoyed it, make sure to recommend it to a friend. And if you hated it, then please recommend it to your worst enemy. If you'd like to get in touch, you can email us cookingwithgrief@gmail.com or follow us on Twitter. That's @cookingwithgrief, but no G on cooking, because we're cool. It'd be great if you subscribe to our channel, that way you'll never miss a new episode. And we'd love to get your feedback, so please leave a comment below telling us all about the things we got wrong. Thank you, Internet. We welcome your indifference and or vitriol.
Even though we live abroad, as women of Indian origin, we have a common thread that binds us together because of our strong cultural background. NRI Women is a platform for women to share their stories and experiences on various topics. Our podcast is about inspiring NRI women and their amazing stories.
Some of the stories we've covered include growing up in a joint family in India, adopting a child as a single woman, and rebuilding one's life after the loss of a child. Take a listen. We hope you'll be inspired or learn something new. I'm Bettina.
And I'm Lenora, and we're the voices behind NRI Women Podcast. We're all heart.
Just look for NRI Woman wherever you get your podcasts or find us at nriwoman.com. New episodes come out every Monday. Make sure you subscribe.